Alright, hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the unit circle. So before we talk about the unit circle, let's define a few key terms. An angle, say we have an angle right here. It's formed by two rays, one right here, one right here. An angle is in standard position when the vertex is at the origin. Okay, the vertex is where the two rays meet, and one ray is on the positive x-axis. So the positive x-axis is here, and this is the y-axis. Okay, so again, an angle is in standard position when the vertex is at the origin and one ray is on the x-axis, positive x-axis. The ray on the x-axis, this one right here, is the initial side, and this one is the terminal side. This one here is the terminal side. Okay, the terminal side. So two angles, so the measure of an angle is positive in the counterclockwise direction. So if we go in this direction, it's positive. If we go in the green direction, it's negative. Okay, so again, if we're moving counterclockwise, it's positive. And if we're moving clockwise, it's negative. Okay. Alright, so if we're looking at two angles, okay, two angles. Let's just say we have one like this and one going like that. Let's just say this measure is 200 degrees. Okay? This measure, since the sum of the number of degrees in a circle is 360, we know that this is going to be negative 160 degrees. And because it's going clockwise from the positive x-axis, it's negative. So these two angles in standard position are coterminal. Coterminal. Again, that's 200. Okay? So those two angles are coterminal. Now, if we're looking at the unit circle, what does it mean, unit? What is the meaning of unit? Unit means that if we look at the radius, so if we took a line this radius is equal to 1. The radius is equal to 1. That's the definition of a unit circle. It's a circle with a radius of 1. And its center is at the origin. Okay, center is at the origin. So what we can do is we can define an angle, right? We can define an angle, and let's call this angle theta. right here, this angle, is theta. So theta is our representation for an angle. If we want to know what the definition of cosine is, so cosine of theta and sine of theta, we can use the unit circle to determine those values. So cosine of theta is the x-coordinate right here. So it represents cosine. If we're looking at this point right here, let's use this as an example. I'll do one in blue. So this distance here in blue is cosine of theta. Okay, I'll just mark that in blue. Sine of theta is this distance right here. Okay, in red. So the x-coordinate of the point right here is the cosine of theta, and the y-coordinate is sine of theta. So how can we figure out what these coordinates are? Well, by definition, if it lies on the x-axis, we know the y-coordinate is 0, right? The y-coordinate is 0. So we know the x-coordinate is 1. And since the initial side and terminal side are the same for this angle, theta is 0. So for now we're just gonna erase this so we can use a chart. Okay, theta is 0. Okay, and now why do we have two blanks here? Well, we're gonna talk about in the next lecture radian measure. For now, just okay, that's 0 degrees, and also 0 radians. This is radians, this is degrees. The next value for which theta we know is 30 degrees. Okay, and that's pi over 6 radians. So again, the initial side is right here, the terminal side is right here. They form an angle of 30 degrees. This right here is 30 degrees, or pi over 6 radians. Okay, so the values on the outside are in radians, the values on the inside are degrees. So what are the x and y coordinates? So what is the cosine of 30? We talked about this in the previous lecture. The cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2. Okay? If we have a hypotenuse of length 1, if we want to find the shorter leg, it's going to be a half, that's the sine of theta. And then we take a half and multiply by the square root of 3 to get the longer leg, which is the cosine of theta. That's the cosine of 30 degrees. Now, the next degree measure we're going to choose here is 45 degrees. That's pi over 4 radians. Okay. Similarly, when we have a hypotenuse of length 1, we know both the shorter and longer leg are the same. So the cosine is square root of 2 over 2, and so is the sine. Square root of 2 over 2. I'm going to write that a little bit more clearly. Okay. Now, this degree measure right here is 60 degrees. So again, the initial side is here, the terminal side is here. The angle formed by those two rays is 60 degrees. This right here is 60 degrees. If you think about the whole circle, it's 1/6. There's 6 slices. So this angle right here is 60 degrees. And this is pi over 3 radians. So cosine of 60 is 1/2, and sine is square root of 3 over 2. Okay, this angle here is going to be 90. It's pi over 2 radians. This time we go over 0 and up 1. So the sine is 1, the cosine is 0. Okay, now we move into the second quadrant. In the first quadrant, all the values are positive. In the second quadrant, the x values are all going to be negative. So here we have 2 pi over 3 which is 120 degrees. So this coordinate again is going to be negative, right? This x coordinate. So it's going to be negative 1/2 positive square root of 3 over 2. And here we have 3 pi over 4, which is 135 degrees. This time the x coordinate is negative and the y coordinate is positive. Right? Okay, now what is this right here? This degree measure is going to be 150. And in radians that's going to be 5 pi over 6. Okay, the cosine is going to be negative, so it's negative square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. Okay, and then finally we've reached 180 degrees. There's no vertical component, so that's 0, and this is negative 1. And that's pi. Okay. Alright, we're running out of memory, so I'm going to have to come back and do this later.